Okay, Lee, so now that we have a project in place and a folder structure established for our project, we're now going to take a look at the level itself, the very simple level that we're going to use in this video series that we're going to put together, and we're going to be using another video series just as a world in which we can run around when showing how to put together a camera system, character, etc. So talk a little bit about the simple level that you've put together.
Yeah, simple being the operative word.
Correct.
Now, what I did is I went into Maya to build a level because I'm used to working with Maya.
Okay, well, let me ask you this. If I was new to Unity and I did not have any sort of 3D package, am I in trouble?
No, you can actually build some very basic levels with some, again, basic geometry directly inside of the editor. If you were to come into the Unity editor, you can see that there are a few
some primitives available.
Exactly. We've got cubes, sphere, capsule, cylinder.
So we
plane.
can take these things, apply materials and textures, and position them in the world, and still use prefabs that come with Unity, character, etc.
Yes.
Position them and still have a playable game.
Yes, and you can even go a little bit more advanced, create a terrain, and you can create a mountain range or a forest or whatever you want. There's quite a bit that you can do.
That's a good point. So once we get into creating terrains and utilizing the tools in Unity to put those terrains in all together, we could make a rich-looking environment without the need for some sort of external modeler.
Correct.
Okay, very cool.
So,
but now you've used Maya in this case to put your simple level together. Are we restricted only to Maya?
No, you could use any of the popular 3D modeling packages.
Like 3ds Max, Softimage, or XSI, excuse me.
Blender, anything that will export an FBX file can be used. So FBX being the operative here because that is the default format that for meshes that Unity understands.
So obviously, with working with some sort of modeler, such as Maya, you have much more ability right there at your fingertips.
Yes, you have a larger tool set. You can do a lot more things with a traditional modeler package. One of the things with these primitives, there's only so much you can do with a cube and a sphere. And
oh, come on, it's just all about being creative.
Well, it's true. The simple level could have been pretty much completely done without using Maya altogether.
This is true. You have cubes, you have cylinders. Yeah, you pretty much have everything right there.
Yeah.
But still, many people out there in 3D Buzzland will be watching these videos, and they're going to have 3ds Max or Maya or XSI sitting there, and they're going to want to know, how do I get my geometry out of this application and over into Unity? So let's go ahead and take a look at this amazing level you've put together.
Oh yeah, you would not believe the amount of work that went into making this level.
You've been talking about it. I can't wait to see it. Let's see. What do you got?
All right. Well, we're going to go back to the folder where we created our simple level. If you remember the last video, I showed you another folder that was already in this folder called Source Assets. Inside of here, I have a file called level.mb. This is a Maya binary file of the level that I've created for the simple project. Now, be amazed at all the work that went involved to make this.
I'm taking a step back, sliding on the sunglasses.
I mean, this was an impressive amount of work.
Oh, that's horrible. I see version 2010 on here, and from my subscription account with Autodesk, I know I have 2011 sitting somewhere on my machine. But before we really start talking about this amazing level, let's spend just a second. Let me ask you some questions about Maya 2010. So since we don't have 2011 running at the moment, are we going to see any difference? If somebody out there who's more modern with the times with their software version, are they going to see something different when they go to export out their geometry than what we're going to see here when we export this stuff out in a few minutes?
Well, I was glad you clarified that. I was looking when I'd hope so. They get 2011.
I know. That's why I flipped the words around.
Yeah, there you go. But as far as exporting, no, it's still going to work the same. You're going to work on your model, get it all ready, and then you're still going to go to File, and you're going to use either the export all or export selection options.
We don't have to jump ahead and start showing them all the goodness that's coming in this video. But I mean, what I'm getting at is, are they going to see a different FBX export screen, or is it still going to look the same?
It's pretty much all the same. It's going to be using their new UI system, but all the options are still going to be contained in there. They're going to be, they might be slightly offset, but they're going to do the same thing.
Okay, I just wanted to get that out of the way because I'm sure we've got people out there that are going to see the 2010 and think, oh no, this video is no longer applicable because I have a newer version. Okay, good.
Yeah, definitely not a problem.
All right, now let's turn our attention back to this amazing looking level. It's like a giant sandbox or something.
Yeah,
what do we have here?
A giant sandbox.
No, okay, fair enough.
Well, it's a very simple level. I didn't, spend too much time. It is a simple level after all. But basically, what I wanted to do was create a level that we're going to use in this series of videos and the next series.
So when we get into creating the camera system, the character controller, etc., you've set this level up in such a way that there are things that we're going to be taking advantage of in this simple level without really blowing our viewers' minds with something that's so amazing with a jungle gym and woods and, waterfalls and things like that. We'll save that for another video set. That's what you're getting at, right?
Correct.
Okay. Well, before you start talking about why you've placed certain amazing looking cubes here and there, answer me this. When starting out, putting a scene together in Maya or 3ds Max, in this case we're just going to refer to Maya, how'd you determine scale?
Well, even before that is the purpose. When you're starting with basic level design, you think about what is the level going to do? What do you need the level to do?
I know. I'm just assuming right now that everybody knows the common sense stuff. I mean, you've obviously jumped into this expensive modeler and you're ready to start putting something together. So you've obviously got some sort of idea that goes beyond the ability of, putting together with simple cubes and spheres and the primitives that are available back in Unity. So the first thing is going to be scale. So let's stipulate that you're going to build something. But no matter what it may be, I mean, is scale an issue? Yes or no?
Absolutely.
Okay, so how do we go about scale?
Well, this whole level was scaled and designed based around our heroine character. We have a character that we're going to be using. You'll meet her in the next series. And she was modeled out, and everything in this scene and all the scenes that she's going to be in are scaled based off of her height.
So you didn't just give her an arbitrary height. She actually has a height of what, 5.5 feet or so?
Well, we calculated or estimated she's going to be roughly about 5.5 feet, and we picked 1.67 meters.
Okay, so that is based off of something such as Maya. I mean, that is an actual height of her. You didn't just say, all right, she's 100 meters tall, or she's 100 units tall. So we're going to say 100 units is 5.6 feet. Mm-hmm. You didn't do it that way, right?
No, we didn't.
Okay.
We all, as us here, as we're sitting around thinking about how we're going to do this, we know that Unity's default unit is in meters. So one unit in Unity is 1 meter. So we decided to keep the 1 meter rule and base our models off of that. So what we did is we came into Maya, set the working units to be meters, which you can see this under Window, Settings, Preferences, Performance Settings. Oh, sorry.
I was about to say performance settings?
Yeah,
your machine shall run so much faster if you switch it to meters.
Preferences. There we go. Settings. Working units, we set the meters.
Now, by default with Maya, it's centimeters, correct?
Correct.
Now, switching over to meters, people could stumble into some interesting problems that they may not be aware of if they're new to working with Maya, correct?
Yes, I'll show you that in a little bit.
Okay.
But yes, definitely. There are definite disadvantages in working with meters. So, but basically, we know that we want our final product to be in meters because all of our objects in Unity are based off of meters.
So when everything is in meters here, you're going to get a 1-for-1 when you take it over into Unity?
If you export and import in the correct process, yes.
Okay.
And that's what we're going to teach you in this video
and
cool. The next one. So we're going to show you how you can take your model out of Maya and bring it into Unity without having to do any scaling, any changes of parameters, and you're going to get something that looks the same in both.
So before we get away from the scaling, let me just throw this out there. So let's say I'm familiar with Unity, and I've brought some FBXs in the past, and I've just scaled those up, and everything worked fine. Can I run into trouble with just modeling to an arbitrary size here, exporting out as an FBX, bringing it into Unity, and then using the scale factor to adjust its size?
As long as it's a mesh that is static, you're going to be pretty much safe.
So if we've got animation going on,
the moment you start rigging stuff and putting animations and parenting and hierarchies and construction history, if you start scaling things, you're going to get unpredictable results in Unity.
Okay, so it's best to just start the project out knowing the size that you're targeting.
Mm-hmm. In this case, we know we want meters. I know the size. I could have modeled it in centimeters, and I'm going to show you a reason why you may definitely want to model all your stuff in centimeters. And particularly if you're starting to do characters, I highly recommend working in centimeters as your scale. Once you've modeled out all your stuff and you're getting ready to animate animate from there, then scale everything up to meters. Set your working units to meters, and then freeze everything at that point, and then rig and animate in scales of meters.
Gotcha.
And the reason why is if you happen to do all your animations and all your rigs in centimeter scale, and you bring them into Unity and try to scale them there, once you run the animations, things will look right, usually. I have seen problems where they don't. But when the object is just sitting there without any animations, the vertices tend to implode on themselves, and it turns into this little weird-looking ball of,
I see. So implosions are not good. So
no,
we want to avoid those.
Definitely not.
Okay, so we establish a size. We can model in centimeters. We just need to keep in mind that once the model is complete and we're ready to get rid of that construction history and begin rigging, if we need to rig it for animation purposes, or even if we don't, we then need to make sure that it is scaled up so that the model is then the appropriate size in the meter world.
Correct.
Okay, so give us an example of the whole issue with centimeters and meters and the tools and how you may see some weird things depending on what scale you're working with or what unit type.
Well, with our incredibly complex scene here, as you can see, I was probably using every tool that Maya has to make this.
Obviously.
Yeah. But as long as you're doing cubes and it's super simple, modeling in meters is not an issue. Where things start
I was about to say, really? I think you're about to break it right now with a very simple tool. Very simple action, actually.
Well, this is really simple. I mean, it only has, 6 faces on it.
That's very good, Lee. Very good, yes.
Well, I had to stop and think about it.
Noticed.
Actually, it's like I was like, 1, 2. Yeah, it's 6. All right, so
let's say we want to bevel the edges.
You really want to bevel it?
Well, yeah. I mean,
but we're in meters.
I know we're in meters. That's the beautiful thing here.
Okay, well, we'll try it. But, you just remember, when we do this, you asked for it.
Gotcha.
So we want to bevel it. All right. Wow. Okay.
Well, the funny thing is, before you make such a big deal out of it, if it remembered your last settings, then it's going to be real funny because it's going to look quite nice. Though it won't remember the last settings because it wasn't done in the options panel. It was actually done over in the over on the side. So.
Well, I'm going to zoom in here as I go on so we can get a nice look at how great this bevel is going to look. I'm going to bring up the hot menu. I'm going to go down to bevel.
The hot menu.
Yeah.
I love it. Hot box.
Hot box. Sorry, my bad. I'm going to bring up the options just because, and I'm going to come in here and I'm going to reset the settings just in case.
Oh, look at you go.
Now, you really want to do this?
Yeah, let's go and do it. So,
all right, here we go. We're going to bevel it.
All seriousness, there's a problem. Look at that. He just clicked to perform the action, and it's as if the entire world changed. That's because now we're inside of a heavily malfunctioned bevel. Actually, the bevel has not malfunctioned. It's more so, an aspect of the number that's being used, the size, the scale. 0.5 just doesn't mean the same now.
Yeah, and in our offset, we use 0.5. This is the default setting. If we were in centimeters, this wouldn't be a problem.
That's right.
But if we wanted something that we would expect, we actually have to go a couple more levels of displacement further in. I can say that, really. Now, let's zoom back in. Here's our object.
You left it at 0 just before you get startled as what happened.
No, I saw it. I got to bring it up. There we go. .001. Here we go.
There we go.
Now we've got what we need. So this is a little bit...
I mean, obviously it's not a problem, but, well, yes and no, because you're running out of accuracy as far as how far down you can push things.
Right. If I really wanted something super accurate, that's going to just turn into 0. So .0001 I think is as fine as I can get. So if I wanted a bevel that was even finer than that, I don't have any more accuracy to pull it off.
Yeah, so just something to keep in mind. And again, this is if you're working with something with a lot of detail in it and with all of the different tools that are available, you may want to just work in the default centimeters, and then once you're done and you get rid of your construction history, simply scale your object up to the appropriate size in meters.
Yes, that'll definitely work. So I'm going to hit Z a few more times to get the bevel off. And let's see.
And one more.
There we go.
All right, so go ahead and give us a quick tour around your level here and explain why you've got, some cubes kind of strewn around and, you've got this ramp on there, and, well, just give us a quick tour.
Okay. Well, as you mentioned, this series is basically leading into bigger and better things down the road.
Correct.
So what I wanted to do was build a level that had some interest and had some things that will make sense in a couple of videos from now, mostly with the occlusion calling and the shadow and light maps and stuff like that. So this will give us some visual interest to play with. But more importantly is in the next series when we start building our character controller and our camera system. What we need is some objects for the character to be able to run into and have to navigate around, and for the camera system to be occluded by. So one of the things that we're going to be teaching in the next series is how to deal with what to do when the camera can no longer see the character or runs into an object, and how to deal with that situation. So what we have is this little Pantheon object in the back. This will give us some fun things to slalom through with the camera. We've got some small blocks that will be able to run our camera, or both our camera and our character into. But then we have these taller boxes. Now these taller boxes have a special purpose. Like with our character, where we designed her height to be 1.67 meters tall to represent 5.5 feet.
Mm-hmm.
When we were designing things, we decided that we designed her, modeled her, and she was animated based on a set of specs. One of her animations is a climb animation. That climb animation includes a jump. She grabs onto a ledge, and then she pulls herself up onto that ledge. Well, we designed the height of that ledge to be 2.85 meters. So what I've done is I've created a few boxes in our scene to be 2.85 meters tall. So it gives us something that in a couple of series from now, when it's time to animate her climb, she can jump up, grab onto, and climb up on top of.
Of course, I have all sorts of great questions about the restrictions and the jump, etc. But I'll save those until we get over into that series.
Now, this guy is our little ramp, as you pointed out before. He only has one purpose in life, and that is the fact that, again, when we get into the more advanced character, once we do animation, we want our character to be able to slide down things. Our slide is going to be based off an angle or friction. So basically, we can dial in the slope at which she won't be able to run up anymore and she'll actually start sliding down.
Okay.
So what I've done is I put a little ramp in there so when we put that in, we can play with it and test it out and make sure it all works. So that is why we have a ramp in here. The walls are in place just to keep her from running off the world and falling off in this space and having to restart the world. So now, as you were mentioning about the scale I set was 100 meters by 100 meters. It gave us a nice size world where it wouldn't take an hour to run from one side to the other. It gives us some place to play around in, and it looks good on camera when you actually render it out. So that's how I did it.
Well, the larger you make the world, the more stuff you're going to have to populate the world with if you want it to be interesting.
Absolutely.
And the more
real level.
stuff you put in, I take it that a lot needs to be taken into consideration to keep things nice and optimized, correct?
Oh, yes. And you can actually get to the point where your level has become so large, no matter how much optimization you put into it, it's not going to run fast anymore.
Well, we've got the MMO tech that we've done, and the MMO tech had 2 zones. Now, of course, we're going to be starting on the real MMO class coming up in the near future for our member sponsors over at 3D Buzz. So when dealing with large areas, because games like World of Warcraft or even our MMO, when we start looking at the zone in which you can run around in, or even in some cases, depending on where you're standing, how far you can see, it's obviously going to be a lot further than if you were standing inside of, you know, some sort of old factory with a gun in hand, like you were playing, you know, Quake or Unreal or Doom or one of those kind of games. Obviously a completely different beast, right?
But there are tricks that you can do. I mean, what you end up with in a large level, similar to WoW, where you're in one zone and you're running up against an adjacent zone, you can actually put in stand-in geometry. So you can actually take a simplified model of the terrain from that zone, the adjacent zone, model it out, and put it underneath your current terrain. And so in the background, you can see something that looks very similar to that zone once you cross over that threshold and load the zone. You can see something similar to that into the new demo project that ships with Unity 3. The one with the soldier, if you take a close look at it, they have a higher res terrain, an actual Unity terrain, which is what you run around on. And then they have a mixture of fences and cliffs that prevent you from leaving that terrain. But underneath that terrain and extending out in a wide radius all around that is a grid of 3, it's 3 by 3, so it's a total of 9 low resolution meshes that make up a larger terrain.
And the whole thing gives you the sensation of being in a
very large world.
Exactly.
With low loss to your frame rate, because those meshes are very, very low poly.
Okay. Okay, I just wanted to just get in a little bit about dealing with large environments. You can. I mean, you just don't want to come in here into Maya and start trying to sculpt out some massive 4-mile wide or 4-kilometer wide, you know, terrain, when you can use the terrain system and other tricks with low-res meshes to accomplish, you know, a much faster experience for players.
Right. If you tried to model out all of Manhattan in a single level and want to detail it to the point where you ran all through all of it in a single level, that would take you a very, very long time.
Okay, so we've covered scale. We've covered, let's see, scale. We've talked a little bit about geometry. What about textures, materials?
Well, there are some things that you can do. As you can see, there is a material and a texture on these objects. Now, what you can bring out of Maya and into Unity is somewhat limited. The only thing that actually comes out is a Lambert. So what I've done is I've taken all my models and I've actually added a Lambert material to each one of them. Now, what I've done is I've broken out the different objects and given each one a different material. The reason I've done this, even though they all use the same texture, is because when I get back into Unity, I'm going to tile these textures differently. And each object, which is going to require a different amount of tiling, needs to have its own material, so I can tile them differently. So the floor has its own texture or material, the walls have their own material, the small boxes have their own, the larger boxes and the ramp have yet another one, same with the columns and the roof of the Pantheon. Each one has their own Lambert material. Now, some of you who are familiar with Maya know that there's a place
2D node. So,
Yep.
well, let me
Place
put it like
2Ds.
this. So there are nodes that are available in the Hypershade that you can use to manipulate the positioning of your texture.
Yes.
So if you utilize those, do they end up coming over into
No, they do not.
Aha. So you could obviously use the UV editor to manipulate UVs, I would hope, inside of your package here. And then if you were to export out your FBX, those UVs will come along and be available over inside of Unity?
Yes.
Okay.
Everything you model, you can UV layout inside of Maya, your other packages, and you can export them. Now, the way Unity works is Unity actually supports multiple UV sets up to 2.
Okay.
So you can actually create 2 different UV sets if you need to. In the old days, or so much old days, a couple weeks ago when we were working with Unity 2.61, I believe it was, you actually use both UV sets. One would be used for your material diffuse texture. The other one would be used for your light map, which you could light in Unity, build your own light maps, export them out, and they would have a separate UV set. Now, if you're familiar with working with game assets, it's very useful to reuse and overlay UVs so you can tile all your textures. And let's say you've got a model of a house that has some floorboards and some paneling and some shingles. You can take your UV and make a texture that reuses the same UV spaces, so you reuse the same part of that texture over and over again. That works great when you're working with just regular textures. Not so great when you're trying to do light maps.
Okay.
Because when you're trying to do a light map, every UV has to have its own space. You can't overlap any. So what Unity has done is it allows for multiple UV sets. So you can have one for your materials, one for your light maps.
So that you can stay efficient with your textures that your texture artists are painting. And then at the same time, you can have another set that can be utilized for light maps.
Absolutely. And while that was crucially important in the old version of Unity, it's not as much so now with 3, with light maps being provided by Beast. Because one of the things that's built into Unity 3, which is a real nice feature, is that you can tell it to automatically generate UVs for your light maps. It will automatically build those UVs and pack them in nicely for you when it builds out its light maps.
Gotcha. Now you said that Unity supports multiple up to 2.
Mm-hmm.
So I take it when you tell Unity to create one, that's one of the 2.
Yes.
Okay. So I was just curious.
Yeah. It'll build its own, so you don't have to build your own light map UVs anymore. So,
okay.
But it doesn't mean that you can't. You can still build out 2 sets. You can go back and use the old shaders. There's actually a place where in Unity you can select the old light map shaders and do it the old way. So, but we won't be covering that in this series. That's for those who used to use Unity 2.6 and would prefer to do it that way. So, but the big thing to know with materials here is you want to create your material. You want to create it as a Lambert. You can attach a file to it. As you can see here, I've actually attached to a texture. Now, when I export this, because this is referencing a file that we're not using anymore, when I bring these into Unity, they're probably going to come in with missing textures, and I'll show you how to fix that once we get into Unity. So, with that, that's about all that I need to say about material. Yeah,
all of the key things I wanted to hit on. Big thing being simply scale, some of the tools when working with different scales, and UVs and materials.
Right.
So you pretty much ready to take this?
I think so.
All right.
I think we can. Now, there's 2 ways you can export stuff from Maya. Now, if you're working on a larger level that's complex and you happen to come in here and you model out something very specific and you brought it into your scene so it could be modeled so you can get a sense of scale, make sure it fits with your scene, and you want to export just that one mesh or several meshes together, you can actually select that mesh. In this case, I'm going to select just the Pantheon, and I'm going to deselect everything else. So now I have just the, now I have the, okay, I'm going to get this really. Now, here we go. Let me zoom in a little bit better. All right, so now I just have this little Parthenon type building selected. Now, if I wanted to select that as its own mesh, I would select just it. I could go to File, Export Selection, and that would give me the options that I need to select just that as its own FBX file, which I could import as a separate mesh into Unity. In this case, because I have this entire level and I want to bring everything in at the same time and I want everything in the same position, I'm just going to go to File and I'm going to export all.
Ooh, and before you do, you did just bring up another nice point. You said in the same position.
Yes.
How important is it with pivot points and positioning from the center of the world when you're building stuff? And for instance, let's say I've decided that I want to make a character and I'm not really paying attention. Now, obviously, this isn't going to happen, but let's just pretend it's been a wild night of, well, having margaritas and all, and I come home and decide I shall allow my creativity to flow and I shall model the best character ever. But for whatever reason, I have slid way over from the center along the x-axis, and I build my character over there on the side, and I then export out from there. If the pivot is still in the center of the character, what happens when I bring it in?
Well, if you didn't freeze your transforms and you left it all with its offsets, it's going to bring those offsets in.
Okay.
And your character is going to still be pivot in the center, but he's going to be in the same spot in the world that he was before.
So I won't get the pivot point that was in Maya if it was still with him all the way over?
You're talking the pivot was actually, well, here, let's demonstrate. Are you talking about if I went into create, let's create a sphere. Oh, good.
Yeah, that one's not turned off.
Yeah, I'm going to have to turn that off. So are you talking about if you have an object and you just move them off to the world like that, or are you talking about having the pivot in the center?
So without talking about the pivot yet, I've moved him over there and I start modeling him right where he's at. So I start extruding those faces and manipulating the vertices around, and the pivot remains in the center of the geometry that's now far down along the x-axis.
Well, it's an interesting thing because what happens is as you bring in meshes from Unity, and they don't actually go into your scene. They go into your project.
Okay.
So you've got a couple of different ways that you can deal with them from there. You can drag them into your editor, and I can bring that up. So you've got your game window, and you have your scene. Here's our project window, and here's our hierarchy. Now, if I have something in my project, and I drag it into the scene, it's actually going to reposition that object to where I drag it in the scene.
Okay.
So that will nullify any offsets that you've got.
Okay. So if the pivot is still in the center of itself, like it is now with the sphere back in Maya, it's going to still be in the center, or does that pivot not have anything to do with?
It will still be in the center.
Okay. So then back in Maya, if you move the pivot, say, to the base of the sphere.
So if I frame up on it, if
hit insert and slide this guy down.
And
then,
actually I can even snap it down here.
Oh, look at you getting all fancy.
Yeah, there.
All right, so say you exported this out. What do you get?
I will get a sphere with the pivot at the bottom of the sphere.
Okay.
It will remember its pivots that you've modified.
Okay, so obviously when you put something together that you plan to animate over in Unity, but you have modeled it inside of Maya, you'll need to manipulate your pivots on the model in Maya.
Correct. And
because
you'll definitely want to do that because in Unity, you can't modify the pivots after the fact.
Okay, that's what I was getting at.
And in some cases, it's a very good thing. In some cases, we, or myself and Zach, and we'll actually go in, make a box, move the pivot just so the pivot's where we want it to be, or a sphere, and then use and bring that in into Unity and use that instead of the default primitives. One of the cases that I can think of right off the top of my head is a plane. Because the way a plane is set up in Unity, the pivots are kind of weird, and I can demonstrate with this. If I go in game object, create other, and I tell you to create a plane, I end up with a plane where Y is up and Z is in depth. But if I want to rotate this thing, so let's say I wanted some sort of plane that was vertical, Then I have a weird situation where X is along the right side and Z is up and Y is facing you. So what we do sometimes...
Now this is for working in the local object space as opposed obviously to world space.
Correct.
But you're saying that you'd like to see it to where when you're working in local space, you're working with what you're expecting, Y up,
Yes.
Z down depth, basically lining up with world.
Exactly.
Okay.
Because it makes it a lot easier to have a plane with the orientations that match the world when you want to start translating stuff.
Okay.
So if you're scripting your plane and it's moving around, it's just easier to have the coordinates in the same coordinate space.
Okay.
So in cases like that, boxes, planes, sometimes it is very helpful to model out a primitive in Maya and bring it back in.
Now, of course, through creating or establishing a hierarchy, you can cheat with pivots if you need to suddenly get a pivot for something that does not have the pivot in the correct place.
Correct.
But we won't worry about it. I mean, you know, you get the idea.
Yes. And
I'm just saying,
it's definitely a
not the
trick
end of the
that
world.
actually we will use it in the advanced section.
Ooh, fantastic.
So I rely on that heavily for one of the effects.
Okay, I apologize to you and to the viewers if I'm throwing too many questions out or we feel like we're getting too far away. It's just the idea of this video is to cover the concept of exporting our level or something out of Maya and over into Unity for use in a game. So I'm just trying to hit on all of the different things that come to mind that could affect the result you get over in Unity when you import the object in.
Right.
So, okay, you can kill out the sphere.
Yeah, we can get rid of that. We don't need it.
So it doesn't have to stay at the center of the world.
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
The nice thing is when you select all or multiples, they will retain their component spacing. What happens as part of the export process is it actually makes a group for everything, and it actually parents everything to a group, and that's how it retains all of its spacing.
Okay.
So what it does is it converts these world coordinates into local positions and maintains them offset based off of their parent, which is a group.
Gotcha. All right, so now let's say we want to export out the entire scene. This is the level that we want to utilize over in our game. So,
right. So what we've done is we've got our level. We've ensured that our working units are meters, everything's scaled up in the meters.
and you've gotten rid of all of our construction history.
Yeah, I can go in, select everything, and I'll use the key combo, or you can actually go into Edit, Delete by Type, History. And that makes sure all construction history is gone.
Okay.
So now we go into Edit, Export All, and we need to put this someplace. So we're going to put it on the computer. We're going to put it into our level, our simple level that we created in the last video.
So you're now actually going right into the folder structure of the actual project.
Yes.
Okay.
And after I open up this folder, it should look fairly familiar. So I'm going to open up the Assets folder. And what you're going to see are all those folders that we created earlier. Now, one of the things that I pointed out when we were creating these folders is that I was going to make a folder called Meshes, and everything that we exported from Maya was going to go here. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up Meshes, and we're going to export our file. I'm going to give this a name of level, and I'm going to call this level_m for meters.
Cool. So after we do that, let's export out another one, but let's play with centimeters, just so in the next video we can maybe talk about the two.
Well, we'll explain it right now, and then we'll do another one.
Okay, cool.
Now, the reason I named it for M as opposed to just levels is there's a quirk in the way exporting and importing from Maya into Unity works, and I want to demonstrate what happens when we do this.
Excellent.
So what I'm doing is the very first one I'm doing is going to be exported in units of meters, and the next one's going to be exported in the units of centimeters. Now, what I mean by that is after you've given it a name and we hit export, it brings up an option. Most of these deal with animations and textures and how to package up and format the FBX file. The one that concerns us right now is this option called units. I'm going to expand it out, and this is the file, or the units to convert the FBX file to. Now, by default, it exports to meters. And because I named this 1_m for meters, that's what I'm going to do. So this one's going to export as meters. Now I'm going to do the same thing again, file, export selection, and this time I'm going to export this as level underscore cm for centimeters, and I'm going to hit export. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, we might want our options.
Yeah, I think I hit export selection instead of export all, though.
Oh, I see.
So
I have no glasses on. I'm 5 miles away.
I usually hit selection instead of export all, so I hit the wrong button out of habit.
There we go.
So now we're going to go to units. This time we're going to select centimeter. Now, a little discussion of why we want to do this. Centimeters is the way you normally want to do this. You want to get everything scaled up to meters, your working units meters, and when you convert, you want to convert and you want this to be set to centimeters. This all deals with the way Unity by default imports their assets from an FBX file.
Okay.
There's actually some scaling that happens internal, and if you select centimeters and export your FBX file that way, you can import it natively into Unity without having to do any scaling whatsoever. So it's a one-to-one and everything looks the way you expect it in your scene inside of Unity as it looked inside of Maya. If you don't do this, you actually have to go through and adjust some settings to get it to look the way you want, and it can cause some problems, particularly if you're exporting FBX that has a hierarchy with a rig and animation and all kinds of stuff.
Okay.
So this is just the way I've found through a lot of experimentation that it works the best. So
Gotcha.
This is the way I've come to do it. So now this one's going to be exported as centimeters. Now what I'm going to show you is inside of our folder, simple level, under assets, under meshes, we have both of our FBX files. They're both the same level, but one has been exported as meters and one has been exported as centimeters. And in the next video, when we come back to Unity and we go to import these, I'll show you why it was important to select centimeters as opposed to meters.
Now let me ask you this. Do we have to import them, seeing how you've already dropped them into a folder that is within the project structure and Unity is going to scan for it as soon as you bring Focus back over to Unity?
Well, technically we are importing them. The moment I click on Unity, that is the import.
Exactly.
So
I just wanted to point that out real quick, because when you go back over to Unity, they're going to be there.
Yes.
They're going to be up under the...
It will actually give you a progress bar. It's going to do the import. We haven't imported them yet. And I purposely didn't switch back to Unity because
gotcha.
that will be the import.
Okay.
Now, technically, I could save this into another folder other than the Assets Meshes folder, or for that matter, anything
just outside
under
of the
assets.
whole project, basically. Yep. I mean, you could just get it away from
Yep.
this and, you know, have your project in Maya that you're saving stuff in.
Exactly. So as long as these FBX files were saved anywhere other than assets or any of its subfolders, it would not import automatically. Then we'd have to use the context menu to import, or we would have to drag them into Unity to get them to import. But because I put them specifically inside of the assets folder, inside this meshes folder, the moment we click on Unity, they will import.
I just wanted to point that out just
No
before
problem.
we ended the video, and we have somebody out there watching this video that is familiar with the fact that Unity will auto scan and pick stuff up automatically that gets put into these folders from some other external application, or simply just, you know, having files dragged and dropped into them from some Explorer or something. Just wanted to make sure that, you know,
No problem.
it's not that we're going to go do file import over inside of Unity. It's an automated process. But with that, I think that covers everything that I wanted to talk about in this video. Anything else, Lee?
No, I think that was a very thorough
All right.
discussion on everything. I mean, it did take a long time to go through this really
I understand.
awesomely
But that's the beautiful
complex
thing about video. You have that little track bar. You can quickly fly to the end if it's boring you, or you can hit stop. Or you can go back and watch it over and over if it's something you just don't quite understand, which some people will get to experience with some of our more advanced videos coming up very soon. So with that, that's going to wrap up this video. Thanks a lot.
Yep, see you guys next time.